We live in a world telling us how to think and what to believe. Our knowledge and understandings of how the world works are rather fixed. New information is often filtered to support existing and limited perspectives. And some new so-called discoveries actually just enforce the perspectives and solidify incorrect notions. Many times, true breakthroughs are ridiculed, hidden, and destroyed. Once in a while, truly groundbreaking discoveries are made by those brave scientific pioneers, free of rigid notions or preconceived expectations. Their life's research often threatens the widely accepted mainstream beliefs, which too many people are reluctant to reconsider. However, these astounding breakthroughs usually go unnoticed, as the ruling orthodoxy in science and history, or rather their overzealous followers, subject them to outright mockery rather than reasonable discussions. Perhaps this is because a higher level truth can greatly disrupt the constructs formed by these incorrect understandings, and what people have invested in or created in the structure must be given up. Now, this may not be hard, it's just a change of thinking. But of course, we must question these discoveries with scientific methodologies and rational debates. One such theory that can change history as we know it, that's rejected by conservative academics, is the discovery of the Americas hundreds of years before Christopher Columbus. For years, evidence has been continuously growing in support of the proposal that people of the Old World traveled to the Americas way before Christopher Columbus ever set foot on the continent. For one, there's evidence of Vikings landing in the Americas around 1,000 years ago. Some suggest that Chinese voyaged into the New World in 1420, some 70 years before Columbus in 1492. The most surprising claim of all is that ancient Egyptians beat everyone else to the Americas around 1000 BC, or over 3,000 years ago. The theory of transoceanic contact between ancient Egypt and the Americas. Previously, many people believed ancient Egyptians couldn't sail the seas for great distances and were only capable of traveling the Nile River. However, recent evidence, like those found in the ancient crafts and cargo containers, suggests those ancient Egyptians possessed adequate knowledge for sailing in open waters, particularly the Red Sea. According to an article written by Paul Darren of the Epoch Times, there is even an unproved theory claiming ancient Egyptians embarked on transoceanic journeys reaching the American Southwest. The story of this claim goes back to the year 1909, when two Smithsonian-supported explorers, S.A. Jordan and G.E. Kincaid, uncovered a network of caves in the Grand Canyon's marble region. Inside these caves, they found several artifacts similar to ones only found in ancient Egypt, including tablets with hieroglyphic engravings. And in April of 1909, the Arizona Gazette published an article of their experience, but the Smithsonian Institution strangely denied possessing any records supporting their alleged discovery of ancient Egyptian artifacts in any part of the American Southwest. And researcher Michael Cremo, who wrote the book Forbidden Archaeology, has documented numerous archaeological excavations and findings over years and years of discoveries, with similar discoveries being suppressed by the Smithsonian Institution. And even the archaeologists who reported these were ridiculed and pushed out of the scientific circles. Could such a historical institution be monopolizing human history and suppressing our true past? Anyway, perhaps the most compelling evidence to support the theory that ancient Egyptians established contact with the New World centuries before the Vikings or Columbus can be found in the exhumed mummified remains from Egypt, the mummified remains of Ramses II. Orthodox history tells us that the nicotine from tobacco and cocaine from the coca plant were unknown to the ancient Egyptians, as they could only be found in the Americas during that time. Moreover, exportation of the tobacco and coca plants overseas supposedly didn't take place until the Victorian era of the 19th century. However, evidence gathered from the remains of ancient Egyptian mummies tells a very different story. On September 16, 1976, the mummified remains of the Egyptian pharaoh Ramses II, who ruled the Egyptians more than 3,000 years ago, was brought to the Museum of Mankind in Paris, France. A team of scientists was given the task of repairing the damage to the pharaoh's body and to prevent further deterioration of his remains. One of the scientists involved in the project was Dr. Michel Lescaut, who worked for the Natural History Museum in Paris. While examining the mummified body of Ramses II, Dr. Lescaut was given samples of the fragments found stuck within the fibers of the mummy's bandages. After analyzing the fragments, she found that they were actually fragments of plants. When she studied the sample under a microscope, she made a stunning discovery. You guessed it, the fragments were from a tobacco plant. Traces of what was supposedly and exclusively a New World plant were found on an ancient mummy from the Old World. This led some people to ask, so how did a 3,000-year-old Egyptian mummy get hold of tobacco plants when mainstream history tells us there was no way ancient Egyptians could travel across the ocean? In other words, where did Ramses II get this tobacco? What Dr. Lescaut discovered was a huge news in Europe at the time, but oddly wasn't loud enough to gain any traction in the United States. Here it was met with fierce criticism from experts of Orthodox thinking, with some dismissing the female scientist's discovery as a mistake due to possible contamination of the samples gathered. And although Dr. Lescaut managed to replicate her findings with new samples from the abdomen of Ramses II's body, the evidence she presented that supported the existence of a transatlantic relationship between ancient Egypt and the Americas was eventually regarded as inconsequential by the conventional members of the academic community. Maybe the Anglo-Saxon Empire doesn't want to lose credit for discovering America by Christopher Columbus. The Lady of the Two Lands. The interesting detection of tobacco traces on the remains of Pharaoh Ramses II would have completely been forgotten had it not been for another accidental and similar discovery involving several ancient Egyptian mummies 16 years later. It was in 1992 when Dr. Svetla Balabanova, a toxicologist from the Institute of Forensic Medicine in Ulm, Germany, examined the mummified remains of Henut Tawi, a priestess who lived sometime in 1000 BC during the reign of the 21st dynasty of ancient Egypt. The priestess's body, along with several other mummies, was basically tested for drugs. To Dr. Blabanova's astonishment, Henut Tawi's mummified body, along with those of other mummies, showed traces of nicotine and cocaine, particularly in their hair. To make sure she wasn't wrong about her findings, Dr. Balabanova had the tests repeated and sent samples to 3 other labs. When they confirmed that her initial discovery was accurate, she published her findings with 2 of her colleagues. However, the forensic scientist's publication was met with acrimonious reception. People called her a fraud and accused her of fabricating or misinterpreting the actual results of her research on Henut Tawi's body. On the other hand, a sizable portion of those who read her work and believed in the credibility of her findings used her research as proof that there was indeed contact between the ancient Egyptians from the Old World and the pre-Columbian people of the Americas. Dr. Balabanova's findings went on to be investigated by Dr. Rosalie David, who worked as the keeper of Egyptology at the Manchester Museum. Her efforts to research the mystery behind the cocaine mummies confirmed that Balabanova's findings were not compromised and that the mummies she studied, including Henut Tawi's mummified remains, were genuine Egyptian mummies of ancient origin. However, despite the corroboration of the skeptic like David, mainstream scholars continue to remain skeptical of Balabanova's discovery of cocaine and nicotine in the mummified bodies of ancient Egyptians. Their refusal to accept her findings also stems from the fact that others also attempted to replicate this toxicologist's detection of cocaine from the samples of Egyptian mummies, but they failed to produce similar results successfully. While some people accept the results of Balabanova's study, they insist that the cocaine and nicotine is explained by the mummification methods used at the time. They say plants containing atropine alkaloid may have been used in the mummification of the bodies, and that these plants necrochemically changed over time to resemble the compounds present in tobacco and coca plants. So they're saying that these are not cocaine and nicotine, but it was some other plants that became cocaine and nicotine after being mummified? From how things are going at present, the jury's still out on whether or not the cocaine mummies will be universally regarded as sufficient proof to validate the theory that there was transoceanic contact between the ancient Egyptians from the Old World and the pre-Columbian people of the Americas 3,000 years ago. Academic scholars and scientists are still caught in a seemingly perpetual tug-of-war on this issue, and it doesn't look like either side will be backing down anytime soon. But perhaps the discourse involving the cocaine mummies is no longer just a matter of whether the findings of Dr. Lescaut and Dr. Balbanova are accurate and valid. Instead, perhaps it's the implication of their research that could be the bigger concern. If we accept the fact that natives living in pre-Columbian America were not primitive savages, but instead established transatlantic contact and maintained trade relations with distant civilizations, then we might completely reconstruct our world history that justified the oppression and forced occupation of the pre-Columbian Native Americans. Yeah, if they weren't savages after all, but an advanced, sophisticated civilization that had trade relations with the Old World for thousands of years, maybe we can't justify the genocide of their people. That seems like pretty big incentive to keep this history secret. What do you think? Post your comments below and let's have a reasonable debate about this.